And we're live, I think. So Bob Cooney here, but you probably knew that. I am coming to you live from downtown Munich, literally standing in the middle of a highway with train tracks on both sides. And I'm here with Brandon Naids from Talon. Say hi, Brandon, before I tell my story.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks a lot for having me, Bob.
Hey, thanks for joining. So sorry, my battery is dying. There we go. So, so a little bit about the backdrop. I was trying to find a place with a decent Wi-Fi hotspot to do the webinar because my hotel has shit Wi-Fi. And there was an internet cafe that said they were open till midnight, and it turns out they close at 9, which is now. And then I went to 3 or 4 other places, and the Wi-Fi was shit, and I was running around, and I just ran out of time. So I plugged into my computer, and my T-Mobile hotspot's working, and Brandon's here. So we'll see how long this goes. The battery could die. The police could come. I could get run over by a train. So we'll go as long as we can. So thanks for, hey, Dominica, thank you. Victor, how's it going? So thanks for joining everybody. Brandon is with Talon Simulations, which is a company that's, why don't you tell them, you're going to do a way better job than I am. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we specialize in virtual reality simulator solutions. We are focusing mostly on the entertainment industry since there's a strong focus in virtual reality and location-based entertainment, but we also do training simulators. That's how we actually got our start. So people will come to us wanting a certain product, vehicle-based simulator, and we'll do anything from race cars, roller coasters, fighter jets, and we're focusing right now on putting together this turnkey all-in-one atomic arcade simulator, which we'll talk about a little bit more.
Awesome. And company, give me a little background. How did you get into the business? I know you guys have done a lot of really interesting stuff on the military side too. Talk about how you got here.
Yeah, so we were a group of mechanical engineering students at the University of Central Florida in Orlando in 2013 when the Oculus Rift hit Kickstarter. And I was an engineering intern at Universal Orlando at the time. So I was working on their large simulator-based attractions there and roller coasters. So I was kind of familiar with that sense of experience. And I saw this concept come out about how you can take these screens, put them in front of you, and now have these 360 displays at a much more affordable price. And actually, one of my first projects as an intern there was to develop our own virtual reality headset, not even a year before. And we were finding these things that were off the shelf. We found like this $1,000 display, put it on a hockey helmet, and that was our version of virtual reality. And we put it in one of those big hamster wheels, the Virtue Spheres, for the Orlando Science Center. So that was my first real entry into virtual reality. And then we saw the Oculus Rift, and we're like, wow, this is a game changer. So we came up with this idea to build a flight simulator with that for our final project in the engineering program. And we put it together with parts from a junkyard in one of my teammates' garages, and we got great recognition at our showcase from industry professionals. Being in Orlando, we had people from Universal Creative and Lockheed Martin all walking around, and we were just there showing our project, and people were really excited about the concept. And it led us to getting a National Science Foundation grant to pursue the idea, test the business model. I went on and to get my master's, and we were able to participate in university-sponsored business competitions. We won a couple of those. That was kind of our seed funding, eventually launching our first product to market in October 2015. And that was kind of the turning point where we're just selling mostly motion simulators and custom packages and focus on training, but then realized we needed to pivot more towards entertainment.
Yeah.
And that was when we started exhibiting at IAAPA.
Cool. And so the first time I think I saw you guys, I don't remember if it was at IAAPA, but you had a drive. You've been working on a driving simulator now for some time, right? And so
Yes.
How's that been going, and what made you want to get into that, and where are you? And is that the video we're going to see, or?
Yeah, so yeah, cool. We got you very sick on our prototype driving simulator at Boyle conference. And
oh, is it the
so
foil conference? That's right. Yeah, with Kevin Williams.
Yeah, so that was a few years ago, and we were trying to put together something to actually, we're still kind of testing what experiences were out there and how to put them together in an effective way. And basically over the last few years of exhibiting at IAAPA and Foil and the Amusement Expo and tons of events in Orlando is a way to tune motion to be more accurate, reduce motion sickness, provide a variety of experiences, not just racing simulators, but fine-tuning our racing simulator experience to be easy for first users of virtual reality, and all the way up to people that are a little bit more advanced and want to actually have difficult tracks.
Yeah.
And we also developed a fighter jet game and a turret shooter. So we brought all of that together now into an easy-to-operate touchscreen display. You choose your experience. Everything's like pre-programmed now to have a pretty effective motion profile and different levels of difficulty on the racing simulator. And so that's kind of been the main parts of the development over the last few years. And the final piece we're bringing together is the arcade cabinet, which will eventually be a attendant-free operator list, like standalone VR attraction to replace a lot of the old school arcade games out there.
So is this a good time to show the video, or?
Yeah, it's a perfect segue.
Yeah, let's see if we can get that on here. So I'm going to go ahead and mute too, so we don't get any feedback. Things I love about what you guys are doing, or the way you're doing it, is you're not rushing the product to market. I talk to so many companies that see trade shows as a deadline to launch, and I've been guilty of that myself. And like, you guys just keep like getting it out there, getting feedback, iterating it, getting it out there, iterating it. It's been a few years now. And so what's that process been like? What are some of the key learnings you've gotten, and how you then, like, how do you know when it's ready too? Like, because you can iterate forever, right? So how are you dealing with all of that? By the way,
well, I think
here in the street in Germany. So
cheers.
Cheers.
So I think we've been fortunate in the fact that it's a new industry, a new market, and there hasn't been a strong demand. So we've been able to kind of sell to people that have been interested, early adopters, get their hands on the simulators and develop it over time. I think we're pretty close to hitting a deadline now. I mean, the space is getting a little bit more crowded on this type of product, and I really think this November is a pretty good launch point. But yeah, even going into last year, I mean, we were even talking, all right, we're trying to get this thing together and launch something at IAAPA or the Amusement Expo, and we just weren't ready. There's several reasons for that too. We're all self-funded, and we just haven't been able to completely accelerate ourselves. But it's worked in our favor because we've been able to slowly bring them to shows, take a couple months to take what we've learned. We're always the first test dummies, so we'll try to get as sick as we can off of the different tweaks that we've done before we let anyone else get on it. And we have some people too that are very susceptible to motion sickness, so we try to make sure that if they can handle it, then we're ready to get out there for some testing. And we've learned things that we like, different features that we can add or shouldn't add, and it's really been our customer base over the last few years that have helped us tune it. The feedback we get at the trade shows, because specifically at IAAPA, people are coming there asking us questions about the product that they want. And so we've taken that advice, and going into this year, we've really started implementing some of those final features to launch at IAAPA that we really think people are going to really like. But even going into IAAPA, we know that there's going to be things and feedback that we get before it's really in its final version. So we're keeping all of that in mind. So all of the software and different hardware add-ons that we're adding, we're keeping that in mind. Okay, this might need to be tweaked a little here and there based off of what people tell us.
Yeah, and so like I want to kind of flip through this a little bit. And so it's actually a fairly sophisticated device. Talk a little bit about the motion base. Like and why did you select what you've selected as far as First of all, why motion? Let's start there. Why motion?
Well, one of the big things, like, we originally started with motion because we thought it was cool, and that was what our first prototype entailed. And actually, when I went back from a master's degree, I had to do a research paper, and I decided to do it on transfer of training and flight simulation, where I read a whole bunch of articles based off of research done on whether adding motion is good for training or just good in general. And it turned out that there's a strong correlation between having some sort of those sensations because of its sensory system in your body. And one of the big things is, if you don't have motion, you can get more sick based in a simulator because what you're seeing and what you're feeling don't line up. Yeah. And I sort of describe it as the opposite of a cruise ship, where your body feels yourself moving, but you don't see it. And in these experiences, you can see yourself moving, but you don't feel it. And that will throw you off quite significantly. So we realized that it kind of is an important feature with a 360-degree view on an HMD that you want to try to add as accurate motion as possible so more people can experience it.
And so why are so many VR motion simulators bad? Like especially the stuff we see coming out of China, not to rap on China, but it is what it is. And and it's well documented, I think, within the VR community and on the user groups about how the Chinese motion simulators are just terrible. So why is it so hard to get it right?
Well, I think a lot of what we see is something that they're trying to get to the market quick, easy, cheap, and I mean, we've tried every sort of competitive device out there and try to see what they do differently, what they might do better, what they might do worse. And yeah, we'll see motion games that absolutely have nothing to do with what they're doing in the game. And I'll take it off. I have a pretty strong stomach, and there's certain ones that I got to take off. But I'm not too sure, because this technology in motion bases has been around for decades. I think there's been an evolution, however, with the game engines and being able to take advantage of that. And so we have a software that extracts the motion in real time from a game engine, so it will synchronize with what's happening in the game, and opposed to recording a motion profile based off of what you see and trying to synchronize it like based off of a human input.
Right.
So that's one way we try to get around it, as well as having the output of motion as close to the same frequency as your VR headset. So if you're getting 90 frames per second on your headset, which you really should be, then you want to try getting as close to 90 frames per second on your simulator as well.
And so how much lag is there? Like, are you pulling this out of Unity queues? Is it in the physics engine? Like, where's the data coming from? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we actually do it a couple different ways because we have different partners that develop the software. And so our racing simulator is developed by Cooney Simulations. It's a Assetto Corsa, which people might be familiar with, and they have their own game engine. So we've tied into their game engine, and they actually have a great telemetry backend server for us to tie into to make it realistic. So that's one way. Same with our roller coaster simulators, No Limits, which is a professional roller coaster software, and they did a great job with their physics engine. Then we also have an SDK for Unity and Unreal, which the two games that we developed, Alpha Strike and Cyber Gunner, are both in Unity. And it's basically a script that you apply to an object that is close to what you would are trying to simulate. So if you have a person in a seat, you want to attach it to that person, and it's taking the data from Unity and going through our motion extraction software and converting it to motion.
Now, I think I played a version of the Cyber Gunner game in a platform at a demo at CinemaCon from Digital Domain launched a new volumetric capture 6 DOF motion simulation platform, and the demo they did was this Cyber Gunner VR game, and I didn't realize I love this game. This is going to be awesome. I can't wait. Are you going to have this at IAPA?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I'm going to play it. So how many games? So obviously you're building a bit of an open platform, right? You're bringing in third-party content. Talk a little bit about the content strategy.
Yeah, that's been something that's been evolving because we're a group of mechanical engineers, we're hardware guys, and we've tried to just license content that's already been developed. I mean, the simulator can work with lots of off-the-shelf games, but there's so many different limitations to that, like the commercial licensing and getting it to support a controller, whether a steering wheel or a joystick, something that makes you feel like you're in the game opposed to a Xbox controller.
Yeah.
And there's those types of things, and we found, and then just making it easy to operate and not needing a keyboard or things like that. So that was when we eventually contracted some developers in Orlando to help us make our own games. And we started with Cyber Gunner because it was something to be very easy intro to virtual reality. People are kind of familiar with the retro style arcade games, so it wouldn't be too intimidating or anything. Yeah. And it's just very straightforward. And that's kind of where we came from there. And then the biggest request we get is flight simulators, but all the off-the-shelf flight simulators are way too difficult and are geared towards hobbyists. So that was why we went towards that route. And now at this point, we're working on trying to build a subscription model. So this is a platform that we sell that will have monthly fee that will allow new games to be added to it, where we would still most likely outsource the development of that until we can bring that all in-house for the most part. Or if a customer comes to us and they say, hey, this looks like a great game that we're interested in adding, we'll approach the developer, give them our plugins, and try to implement it into our operator interface as well. So there's a couple different avenues there, and it's just about building up the population of these out there and seeing what works best for our customers.
Yeah, cool. So do you want to tease anything around like pricing, availability, timing, or you want to wait for IAPA to do that? What's your pre-launch promotional strategy?
Yeah, so we are still finalizing a few things. We are selling these still. They're just not in our turnkey arcade cabinet, but we do have a version that we were selling at IAPA last year that is an actual turnkey system. It's just not as pretty as our new one's going to be. Yeah. So we do advertise the sale of these turnkey systems are just under $33,000, and that includes all the hardware, the commercial licenses for these games, and the operator interface as well. So it makes it a lot easier to just use a touchscreen You can control multiple from one tablet as well. So just being on the same network, which really eases up the need for an operator in these certain locations. So we have all this info on our website, and honestly, the more people that give us a call and tell us what works best for their locations will allow us to fine tune this final product in November.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about Dave & Buster's. So the Dave & Buster's project, everybody knows about it. It was a massive rollout of VR. It kind of gave a lot of credibility to these, to the VR, FEC market. And there were 786 companies that have taken some credit for some portion of that project. What part did you play in this project, and what was it like, and what did you learn out of it?
We helped really with the final integration of making sure that this will be like a final product, and assisted with the hardware software integration of all of the simulators. And we actually built and tested all of the motion bases. So there was a company that was doing the metal manufacturing. VR Studios did all the software. This was all of their concept as well. So we kind of came in to mass produce them and help bring it to market. We ended up getting assigned the role of the support team. So we were the ones making sure every store got up and running before the launch day. And we still are assisting with support. So whenever anyone at the stores has an issue, they'll call the Talon VR hotline, and we'll do everything we can to get them back up and running as soon as possible.
Yeah, cool. And so I know. Look, I want to flip through these, and if there's anything else that you want to talk about as far as projects go before we move to your passion, and anything else you want to talk about this product before we shift over to talking about safety in VR and why it's important and what we can do about it?
Well, we've been spending a lot of time on the Atomic Arcade, which is very applicable. There's a great photo of us at our senior showcase, so we've come a long way.
Is that like
the parts from Junkyard?
Senior year in college, right?
That's the one.
When everything's blue sky and promises.
Makes it seem easy now, but the one thing. So this is our flagship product, our turnkey arcade system. However, the simulator is very adaptable and adjustable. So some of those pictures that you click through on our client projects showcase different things that we've created with the simulators, and because we can sell just the simulators and the SDK and allow developers to create whatever. So that Nuot VR experience is out in Kidzania in Dubai, and Nuot bought the simulators, created the space experience, and built it into their exhibit. There's been marketing activations that we've done. One of the really more exciting and really cool things that we've been working on right now too is with Bell and their helicopter simulators that they're using to collect data for the future of vertical takeoff and landing vehicles for Uber air taxis. So it's pretty insane the different applications that these simulators have. So we're building out our verticals, and although entertainment is our primary focus now, we know that we want to be able to assist with those sorts of projects, whether marketing or research. But as well as with training. So we've got our foot in the door on a few military projects, and they're starting to adapt virtual reality as well. So we're trying to keep our niche being arcades and entertainment centers, but not forgetting about the other applications. And
you got to keep the doors open when you're a startup, right? So project work oftentimes for companies like yours is the lifeblood of the business which gives you the runway to get the product right and perfect it, which is awesome. So cool. Well, I look forward to seeing it at IAAPA and talking about IAAPA. We're going to be doing a panel together, and you are the chair of the VR ARA safety committee. And so talk a little bit about what that mission is and why are you in it and why should anybody care?
Yeah, I got familiar with the ASTM meetings. Well, I guess I was familiar with ASTM, which is the American Society of Testing Materials, just from studying mechanical engineering. And so these are standards for all sorts of industries. And I think Crystal, they're very active in the F24 committee, subcommittee for amusement rides and devices. So I'd gone to a few of these amusement ride conferences for ASTM during college and got familiar with it. And once we started the company, I was like, well, we were starting to see people just buying VR stuff and putting it out everywhere. And so it got a little concerning, and I started talking to some of the people that were running ASTM, and they shared similar concerns, enough to the point where everyone agreed that we needed a task group on AR, VR, specifically related to HMDs. So there is lots of major modifications, which is its own part of ASTM as well. There's all of these certain standards on if you're going to upgrade a ride, and there's people that are just adding HMDs to all these rides without necessarily applying those safety standards. And then, I mean, we could easily pull pictures online and see all of these unsafe practices of people using VR headsets.
So name a few that you've seen that you think are the most common, because I don't know if people know that this is an issue, and they might not. So, you might take it for granted that people know this, or that people understand what you're talking about. Give me 2 or 3 examples.
I totally agree. And I think that I don't know, and I think bringing awareness to it is the most important thing. But one of the big things is wire management. We're not completely wireless yet, and people are trying to clean up how the wires are, but you can still easily get tangled, trip over things, which you can then walk into walls. You can accidentally throw things at people. And that's one of the big things as far as like room scale and warehouse experiences that we've seen. Is there a way to really prevent that? And I don't run a location, but I work with several places that do. And I go and check in on them. And sometimes we see certain things that and hear stories of these instances, and like, what can we do to combat them? Yeah. And we're not really to the point of having answers. We try to recommend best practices, but we are working on trying to see where VR, AR aligns, because pretty soon augmented reality is also going to be implemented into amusement attractions more and more. And it's not so much the media that we're showcasing, as there's been decades of media-based attractions, but it's more so the act of putting on an HMD and what that entails. So whether it's hygiene or safety and
so all right, but look, we're in the amusement industry, right? And we've got decades and decades and decades of dangerous fucking shit, right? So like every time I see a kid in a bouncy house, I cringe, and I wonder why we don't have more skull fractures. Or maybe we do, and they're just not counted and documented. Trampoline parks, broken bones, broken necks, broken backs, whiplash on roller coasters, laser tag. You got 20 people running around a dark room shrouded with fog and strobe lights. So right. Is VR really any more dangerous than any of that shit that happens all the time?
Well, we're starting to just believe that it needs to be addressed in a way that people don't just keep trying to deploy virtual reality attractions without considering how to safely operate them. And a lot of that came on with VR coasters, or which has evolved a lot over the years. And then, but just people taking VR headsets and putting them in malls. So there's been definitely some good reaction videos over there, but things that really could have been more harmful than they were. And it's not necessarily the idea of trying to restrict it in any way, but what we've seen is a lot of providers and new locations are people that are pivoting from the consumer technology industry, which is a way different market, way different technology. Like they're taking products that were meant for consumers and trying to put them in these locations, which also has its own ramifications. And that, I think, has been the biggest, had the biggest impact on why we're starting to see things like this and not properly utilized. because industry veterans, the people that are now starting to get more into the technology, that have been vetting it a little bit more, not so much of a problem. It's more some of the newcomers and people that were trying to get more familiar with it.
Yeah.
But
an example of that. So I'm in Germany, and part of the reason to come here was go to do the VR bumper cars in Nuremberg, and then do the VR coasters. There's 2 of them that Europa Park has, from Mach Coaster and VR Coaster, that were done with holodeck VR. And and I talked to the guys that were doing some of the safety around the VR bumper cars, and they talked about having to slow the cars down, and the extra weight on the head, increases the potentially the G-force and the amount of the amount of whatever happens when your neck snaps when you hit something, and so they had to take that into consideration. And so and I think Germany is a pretty highly regulated market, as most of the EU is, and I know they had to go through a lot of that stuff. And maybe, is this an American thing that you think that's a challenge, and do we need to follow other markets where it's being done better, or do you think it's not being done well anywhere, or what I know this is important to you, so where do you fall on that?
Yeah, I think it really is a global scale issue, and issue is kind of a strong term, but it really, some people that come and are part of our task group, they see some things out there as well, sort of from the non-VR expert point of view, that concerns them as well. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be virtual reality related as far as the headsets go, but there's a lot of knockoff products as well that might not even be certified legally, like whether it's UL or CE and like that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of aspects to it that can be unsafe. It's a VR product with all of these other attachments and things that you really aren't even legally allowed to have in a mall because of the restrictions that they have. So I do think it's a global phenomenon, but obviously other countries are going to be a little bit more adapt to that kind of thing. Germany is kind of ahead, I think, in a lot of those aspects, and work really closely, however, with the ASTM standards, because there's the EU standards, and we have several of their representatives over at our ASTM meetings as well. I know Mach and VR Coaster are both involved, and so they definitely don't take these things lightly, and they do a great job at following those standards and applying them. But when we see maybe just another secondary company and that same sort of product range not necessarily do all of those things, then that's when it becomes pretty worrisome. And there were instances of that.
Yeah, and look, I'll cop to this. I remember at LaserStorm in the early days, we were a bootstrap startup, and we had to get FCC testing, and we went to, I think we had TUV Reinhold, whatever, that did the testing for us for, to get a UL listing, but we probably didn't do that until we had 30 or 40 locations out there out of the 230 or 270 or whatever we ultimately did, and occasionally a customer would ask about it, but frankly, like, it never came up. And I was talking to somebody recently that just left a company in the VR arcade market who's building kind of VR game ride things. And he told me, I'm not going to name him, but he told me, it's like, yeah, we never got, UL and CE listings, and we didn't, and nobody asked for it. There's some big chains that are running this stuff, actually. And it's really shocking how the buyers don't actually do their diligence on what has been approved and what isn't. Because ultimately, if it comes down to the liability, I know the manufacturer is going to be liable, but if it's a startup company and they don't have good product liability insurance, or they don't have a big fat bank account, which a lot of the companies in the VR space don't have, ultimately they're going to be held liable by whoever gets hurt. And I think that's a message that I think, probably needs to get out there to the operator community, is who are you buying from, and what, and what do they have, and how are they going to back up what they've done if something does go wrong?
Yeah, that's a huge point. And you actually referenced something similar on your Traction Pros podcast about how the
Did you actually listen to that?
Yeah, I got on my phone, I saw it, and I was like, I'll listen to this. I'm driving across town, and yeah, it was awesome. But you're making a point that the operators depend on manufacturers for innovation, and that can be pretty detrimental. It kind of goes the same way where they rely on them for safety. And one main reason I think the Dave & Buster's VR attraction's been so successful is because they were responsible for picking and designing this attraction and making it the way that they know it needs to be for their location. And not every operator is capable of doing that and designing their own thing.
And I think, look, but let's dig into that a little bit, right? So obviously everybody's going to look and say, oh yeah, Dave & Buster's, hundreds of locations, public company, lots of money, they can afford to do their own deal, right? But like, I'm talking to operators with 3 locations, 4 locations, 5 locations, and let's talk about your platform. If an operator wanted to deploy your motion platform with a custom experience, all right, what's it cost to make a quality custom interactive ride software on your platform? Like, what would a budget be for that? Give me a ballpark.
Yeah, well, I love that question because that's always my question.
String, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's our question when we go to software teams to help us build games.
Give me a range. Give me a range.
Yeah. Well, I always the bigger the budget, the better the game. But I think you can get something accessible for less than $100,000. I would recommend just about that price if you can afford it. But
so let's just do the math. Let's say you put 4 of these in every location, and you've got 3 locations. That's 12 units, and you spent $100,000 on the content. That's $8,000 per unit to have a custom content that's different than anything else in the world. And now all of a sudden you've used VR to differentiate. Like, that's never been available in our industry before. You couldn't do your own version of fucking Pac-Man, right? So every arcade has the same games, but now that these with Unity and all the tools available and the asset libraries being so inexpensive and the models being great and the software being easily and the APIs and all of this stuff that's available, like, locations can do, smaller chains, little mom and pops almost can do custom development. I don't see enough of that happening. I think that's going to be a trend in the future.
Yeah, and it really is as easy as calling up a studio and getting it out. Or calling us. Well, obviously call us and we'll help create it for you. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is opening up a lot of opportunities. So I think that's a great point, and it's be a big transition for this industry.
Yeah. So Mark's asking about liability releases. So it's a really good question. And I just got to do a power check. Normally I do a time check. Unfortunately, I have to do a power check because I am standing in the middle of the street and I'm powering a microphone and a light and all of this shit, and I'm using my cell phone, and so I'm down to 22%. So we're going to have to do a power check now. But liability releases, and so I know they're rampant in VR arcades, the room scale Vive, arcades. People make them sign liability releases. But if you put this in a FEC, are you going to recommend that the operator does a liability release to ride your game?
We recommend it, but we don't really, for us, we don't get everyone that rides it to sign a release. It's sort of, we'll have a sign up. It's this general disclaimer that you're signing away when you use the attraction.
Yeah.
For the majority of people we work with, they have, member profiles that in order to do anything there, you need to sign a liability release. And that's really how we think you need to operate for the most part. That just helps for the efficiency of everything.
Yeah.
And one great way that you can also take advantage of that is then having money on a card or something tied to your profile, and you can use it all around the arcade.
How does Dave & Buster's deal with it? Do you know?
They do not have you sign.
Yeah.
They have a liability disclaimer at the entrance, and
which is what ski resorts do, right? I mean, you don't sign a liability release when you go to a ski resort, or when you go to Universal Studios, or when you go to Disney World. They have a disclosure on the back of the ticket. They have a sign that says, buyer beware, kind of. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, better safe. I mean, especially in this time and age, it's just, I think we always will recommend that you try to get a liability waiver in some way integrated, but
Yeah,
it's not forcing you to.
Yeah, and we did that. Like at Laserstorm, I decided not to use liability waivers because what I didn't want to do is put the thought into the mind of the parent that this was inherently dangerous, because I didn't think it was. Now, a trampoline park might be a little bit different, but there's also the obviousness of the fact that people are going in there and they're jumping up and down and doing crazy shit. But here comes the European ambulance. Everybody listen. I love that sound. I feel like I'm in a Jason Bourne movie. Awesome. In case you guys thought this was a green screen behind me. Yeah, cool. So what's coming out? All right, so IAPA, big launch for you guys. What else is happening that we should know about as we get down to 17% battery on my laptop?
Yeah, I think that I would like to say we're a company to keep an eye on. We definitely have some other big news like that we have cooking up for everybody, and just follow us on social media and visit us at the trade.
How do they get in touch with you?
So talonsimulations.com is our website. We're on Facebook at Talon Sim, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. So we always share all the different updates to those channels. And
now there's a couple of handouts too that I have here. One is the ASTM February presentation. So I've just put that in the chat. If you guys want to click on that and download it, talk a little bit about what's happening in the world of safety and virtual reality. And then there's also a website I think that you wanted to show as well.
Yes, our next meeting is October 16th, the week of October. It's like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but our meeting is on that Friday. And so it's free to go to. It alternates twice a year, once on the West Coast, usually in the fall, and then usually in the East Coast for the spring. So it'll be San Diego in October and then New Orleans in February.
Cool.
And it's a great networking event. I mean, it's all the big chains are there, and
really
just engineers, business people, and everyone comes together, puts the differences aside. And
where is the next meeting?
It's in San Diego, the Omni Hotel.
Not a shitty place to go in October, just saying.
Yeah, so it should be October 18th is the day of our AR/VR meeting. But I'm usually there all week just to participate in some of the other discussions as well, and just get more familiar with how to operate in the amusement industry. I mean, there's manufacturers, suppliers, operators, and everything. So
yeah, cool, awesome. Any other questions from the audience before we get? We're at 12% battery life, and it's getting late here in Munich, and I have to leave at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for a flight to somewhere. I have to leave at 5 a.m. My producer Kylie just told me. So awesome. So I'm really looking forward to. Brian says Vive versus Rift. I have a feeling. Is that are you talking about Oculus or the give me some context on that question, Brian. Are you using the what are you using?
We use the Vive Pro on our arcade systems. Up to this point, we still are agnostic to what HMD we use, and of course, we just put together a portable driver training system to take around to different events to help people get more acclimated and learn about the dangers of distracted driving and stuff. So we set them up with Rift S because it's a lot easier to set up at locations. But if we're doing a permanent installation, then we will go Vive Pro.
Yeah, and so the question there is really why Vive Pro over Rift at Dave & Buster's? Do you know what the decision process around that was?
It was related to the tracking. So you have 4 people there. It was easy to then have the base stations, and then we actually use a tracker on the motion base to provide the best experience and cancel out the motion. So it's relative.
I was at Hollowgate today. By the way, I played the new Angry Birds game on Hollowgate, and a lot of you guys probably know that I haven't been the biggest fan of Hollowgate's games historically. I feel like I feel like they were a bit boring and repetitive, and I have to say the Angry Birds game was fantastic. And so they're going to be releasing that at Gamescom in Germany next week. I won't be there because there's 400,000 people there, and I wouldn't go to anything that has 400,000 people. But I was really impressed. We talked a little bit about Vive Pro. By the way, I got to try the new Valve Index, and thought it was super comfortable and really liked it. And the resolution was great. I think there's all kinds of questions about supply chain and their commitment to building hardware over time. But I know a lot of companies have had trouble with the Vive Pro, where the Vive was just bulletproof. Everybody likes the Pro because it's easier to put on. It's better for mechanical engineering, and it's better for out of home and location based. But lots of people struggling with like drivers and tracking issues and stuff, and video and audio. Have you experienced any of that?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think mostly we haven't seen it too drastic because most of our installations still use the Vive Business Edition and haven't transferred over too much to the Pros. So, we've seen a little bit of that here and there. Not significant, but there's pros and cons to all of the HMDs. We just got in an Index not too long ago, and we were very impressed by it and really are excited about it a lot. So we'll all wait and see the direction that goes. Yeah. But we like to try to stick with the more durable one. It might be a little bit more buggy, but if it can break less physically, then we see that more as a benefit. Yeah. Yeah, cool. What about the new inside out? Since we're on headsets, what about all the new inside out tracking stuff? Are you playing around with any of that? Yeah, I like the concept of it, not needing base stations and everything. It does have its limiting factors in regards to us canceling out the motion and getting relative positional tracking. So that's an issue with the motion simulator. Yeah. The biggest thing we see is when you push the brake pedal in and you fly forward, you're now in the dashboard. And so we can work around that with the Vive because of the external cameras, but these inside out tracking headsets are a little bit more closed source, and it's hard for us to try to get our motion data and play around with theirs to then output it. So that's been limited. So last question from Brian, Magic Leap. Have you played with it? What do you think of Magic Leap and AR in general? We're really excited about AR, and we just don't think it's quite where we need it to be to really put it into a product. We're also still trying to find the best use for it in a simulator product, just because with the VR you can fully encompass yourself in a vehicle. But if you're going to use AR and just have a digital display on the real world, you really need to figure out how you can convince someone that they're in a fighter jet or in a car. That there is going to be a play, so we're keeping our eye on AR, and that's in our long-term vision. So and I would add that until the field of view gets better, Magic Leap just is a non-starter. It's super expensive, battery life, like it's just not anywhere close to ready for prime time in the location-based space yet. So cool. Well, I am down to 4%. And so we're gonna call it here. Brandon, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I know you've got a lot going on and getting ready for the show. And I really look forward to both doing the panel with you. Which, by the way, the panel is going to be me, Brandon, Kevin Backus from Dave & Buster's, and George Smith from FEG. So it's a powerhouse panel. So if you're coming to IAAPA, make sure you come and check us out. Do you have a booth number yet? Yes. Do you know what it is? It is not off the top of my head, but it'll be on our website. Look in the directory, look in the website. I'm sure we'll get that information out to everybody. Love to all of you from Munich, and I think the next time next week, I'm coming to you live from Brisbane, Australia, and I'm going to be with the makers of Richie's Plank, and we're doing a meetup in Brisbane with the VR community, and we're going to go live from Brisbane with that whole meetup. And so I have no idea what we're going to be talking about, but I think it's going to be amazing. So we'll see you from Brisbane, Australia next week.
on, what's this called? Deep Dive webinar. Thanks to my producer, Kylie, and peace, love. We'll talk to y'all later. Thanks again, Brandon.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, bye-bye.
Safe travel.